I'm the operations manager here at Excite Media.
And I'm Laura, I'm the head of SEO and copywriting.
And welcome back to our second last of our video series on, we're going through our chapters of our new book called WTF is SEO. And today we are talking about branding. If you want to go see some of our other videos, make sure you check those out. They will already be live. But yes, Laura, seems a little bit odd to have a whole chapter on branding in an SEO book. Surely that's not relevant, surely. Do you like how I am leading the leading question there for you?
I love the leading question. Yes, it is relevant. Brand authority is becoming a massive part of SEO. It's probably one of the newer concepts within SEO, but it's certainly just as important as the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, can you tell me why brand matters? And also, I've heard a lot about this term brand entity. What does all that mean, and how is it actually impacting SEO?
Yeah, so I guess a brand entity is a thing. It's basically all of the little pieces of a puzzle that make up your brand into an entity as Google sees it as being one cohesive thing. So if you think of Excite Media is the entity, and you're a piece of the puzzle, and I'm a piece of the puzzle, and Lorian out in the office, she's a piece of the puzzle as well. And then, our services make it up. Our address is kind of part of it. Our office, the green splotch, soon to be black. Spoiler. All of those sorts of components of the business and the brand, they all make up what is the entity of Excite Media.
So, Laura, what are the elements of a strong brand? What really helps it stand out in the market?
Yeah, so a strong brand is, you've obviously got your logo, and that should be something that's recognizable without the words of your brand. And obviously, that doesn't count if your logo is a word mark. But if you have a symbol associated with your brand, that should stand alone. Like you can see the Excite Media splotch. And that's Excite Media, even though we haven't put Excite Media next to it. So there's that. There's, I guess, also the brand name that should be unique and distinct. You've got your colors. It should be, colors that can be seen and identified alongside or outside of your logo and your name. And then you've also got your tone of voice and sort of the way that you word things. For bigger brands, you've got your products that probably stand alone in terms of like how they're named. So if you think of Go-To Skincare, that's a really good brand. But then if you talk about, the hero product, Face Hero, if I say Face Hero, most girls...
No idea.
Never mind.
I'm the exception, not the rule.
If you say Face Hero, a lot of people are going to know that you're talking about Go-To. They're going to see that peach color in their mind before they think of what those words actually mean. It's a product, it's a name that stands alone. So it's a really strong branding tool.
Yeah, I guess I think of two things when you are talking about all of this. I think about, all the dupes that are being released for like skincare and makeup products, and they'll always have very similar packaging, and then you can easily identify what dupe it is. I guess I think of like Kmart with their Sol De Niro dupes, and it's all the exact same colors with the exact same scents or similar scents. Obviously not as good of a formula necessarily, but more affordable. And I guess the second part that I think of is, I think it was a little while ago now, but that logo game where they would remove the name of the logo and everyone had to guess the logo name. And I know that was really big for a while. And I think those logos that people were able to guess really easy. And I think, McDonald's and Coca-Cola and Toyota, all those sorts of logo and marks and their brands. And it is more than just their logo marks, isn't it? It is, you walk into a McDonald's, you know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to know what it smells like. They all look the same as well, even though they have different layouts as well. That is all part of the brand, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So you've touched on two really interesting ideas there. And the first is that sort of dupe culture. You know what product they're trying to emulate in Kmart because you're seeing a product that is the same shape. Like you recognize the shape of the tub for, is it Bum Bum Cream?
I mean, the bum bum cream or the perfumes or whatever.
Exactly. You recognize the shape of that packaging, and like that's such a strong branding tool. But as well as that, you can tell that it's a ripoff because they haven't pulled off the color perfectly. Because Sol de Janeiro, is that what it's called? Because that brand is so strong.
And I think also they wouldn't want to, because otherwise they could get in trouble.
Well, that as well. But yeah, and then the other idea is, that logo game. If you think of, say, Nike, their logo is just a tick. And I can imagine, I often think about this with like your bigger brands, particularly Nike. I wonder if there was a boardroom of people where they're like, it needs more flourish, we need to add more, it's just a tick. Because I can imagine that happening, having worked in marketing for as long as I have. There's always someone that's like, I don't know if that's enough. But that tick, you see it's on a jumper, you don't write Nike with it. You see just that small embroidered tick on a jumper, and you know that that's Nike, and you know what that brand represents entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the Ralph Lauren, the little iconic the polo player and things as well. I think that's it as well. Simple can be good. It doesn't need to be overly complicated. I actually think that Ralph Lauren logo mark is actually almost bordering too complicated as well. Obviously, it's got the history and the heritage that allows it to be that complicated. But if you're a brand new business, simple is not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think often those simple sort of logos or those simple symbols can actually have much more impact.
Absolutely. And I guess, Laura, moving on now a little bit about brand consistency, because I think that's probably the key part of SEO, isn't it? Is how consistent your brand is, otherwise you're not going to get the benefits of the brand. I think a great example of Excite Media is Excite Media can also, a lot of people use it interchangeably with Excite. So how, I guess, does that impact your brand, especially for people who have these really long business names and automatically shorten them, or they have, a logo mark, but it's a lot to get it updated everywhere. Just hard work, it's expensive, if they got car wraps and things. How does that all impact this as a bigger picture?
Yeah, so I think there's a few sides to this. So if you think about just brand consistency, if we think about, say, Excite Media in Brisbane, you think about all of the different touch points that our logo has. So if you're walking down High Street in Toowong and you look up and you see the logo on our sign, that's one part of you noting Excite Media in your mind. And then you might see one of our wrapped cars drive down the street. That's another tick for seeing the brand. And then maybe you're on Facebook and you see one of our paid ads appear in your feed, and that's another tick for seeing it. The key with brand recall is that you're seeing this brand consistently and it always looks consistent, and it's the same every time, and it's something that sort of sticks in your mind. And the more that you see it, the more that you're going to recall it. And if that's also backed up with the right message that's sort of consistent, one day we're not saying, oh, we're a digital marketing agency, and the next day we're just talking about shoes on Facebook. That would be weird. We're always sort of talking about the same things. We're always building on our message of helping small businesses and doing digital marketing, and it all sort of comes together in that way.
A lot of consultants tend to fall into that trap, don't they, where they're keeping it vague because they can do lots of things, but sometimes that actually causes confusion instead.
Yes, exactly. So you want to, I think that's why it's so important to just have a clear message from the get-go and really define what your business is and what it is you do and what you're trying to sell. And it always comes back to your brand.
Definitely. So obviously we're talking about that consistency and how it impacts SEO. Laura, how does, I guess, we've talked briefly about how I'm part of the entity of Excite Media. How does how I interact and present myself online as an employee of Excite Media, and obviously in my public situation, not necessarily in my private life, like a LinkedIn profile, how does that impact the entity if perhaps I've got like a different logo mark or a different job name or something like that?
Yeah, so I think I've touched on this in a previous video, but if you think about how Google is understanding the context of a business and a brand. They're sort of looking at all of the other pieces of the puzzle that are across the internet. So it'll come to our website and it'll crawl our pages and it'll get to our team page and it'll see, you know, Rebecca Nordqvist is our operations manager, and it wants to see other pieces of the puzzle online off our website as well. So if we're going to introduce you on social media, we want to reference you as being Rebecca Nordqvist, our operations manager. And on LinkedIn, it's important that that's consistent as well. If you were on LinkedIn and it said that you worked for a different agency, that might be a little bit confusing to Google.
I think that's it, isn't it? It's creating a cohesive, almost chain, because the second something isn't consistent, that daisy chain breaks, and then any value of that person, maybe that authority has, especially if you have someone in your business who is a thought leader. I know we have one client who has this representative of their business, and they talk at conferences all over the world and things. And he's a really valuable part of their authority and their trust. And we obviously touched about all the experience and expertise in the previous video. But they would have absolutely no benefit from that if that person also wasn't advertising themselves as a part of their business. That almost daisy chain would break, and then Google would be like, well, I think it is, but I'm also not sure. A good way to almost think about brand is in the way that a lot of people talk about something called citation building, which is that consistency with the name and address and phone number, Laura.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you touched before on, well, what if we're called Excite somewhere else on the internet? And we definitely are. And, that's probably not ideal. As the head of SEO, I do want us to be consistent across the web. And I know that Excite isn't going to be understood by Google as the entity of Excite Media. But if we're in an article and they introduce us as Excite Media, but then later on, a little bit more casual with us and call us Excite, then those two ideas are a little bit more linked. Yeah.
That's it. It's putting it together as a whole, and Excite Media as the whole, and then giving it context. Would you say, on a LinkedIn profile, if I say I work for Excite Media and then my posts use the phrase Excite, do we think that's acceptable?
Yeah, I think Google is smart enough to understand, I guess, natural language processing and how things are nicknamed and referred to differently across different posts as well.
Yeah, that's it. It's people getting colloquial about their brand, but making sure I think fundamentals are really consistent, where it is that introduction of the brand and, the profiles of this social media, make sure that is consistent with the messaging that you're putting out. And and it just helps the entity all together as well. I think another part of this is that you mentioned in our video about the authority and the digital PR component of this is the fact that Australian journalists are a lot more integral, and it can be difficult to get a backlink. But as you briefly mentioned, and there's not enough evidence to fully support this, but the theory that just a brand mention can also help as well.
Yeah, and I think the theory is that brand mentions are becoming or will be almost just as important as getting that backlink, because it is, again, adding another piece to the puzzle on the internet that's referring to you. And, if you put Excite Media in an article on its own, Google might be able to link that with us, even if we don't have that backlink. But if we're adding those other pieces in, so, maybe we're quoting Rebecca Nordqvist and maybe we're talking about digital marketing and we have some other context clues within the article, then it becomes quite obvious that the article is talking about Excite Media, the business, and that entity that Google knows.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't need to connect. It's all those little components putting together that it doesn't need the direct instruction. Of course, always helpful if you can get that direct instruction. But these bots are smart enough now to be able to really put that together. Laura, I guess, what are the quick wins that someone could take away from this video and just immediately go and implement that would actually help improve this for them?
Oh, some quick wins. I would make sure that your logo is consistent across your website and all across your social media channels. And it's okay if maybe you have like a longer version of your logo with the word mark and the symbol, and then on your social profiles it's just the symbol because that fits nicely in a circle. That's absolutely fine, but as long as you're having that sort of consistency across the board, making sure that your business name is the same on your website as it is on those channels, making sure that your address and your phone number lines up across all of your listings, making sure that if you click through from, say, your Instagram profile to your website, there is consistent coloring and fonts and things like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the business name's an interesting one as well, because touching back on those Google business profiles, when people were, stuffing those keywords into their name, that's actually also obviously against Google's guidelines. But it's also bad for your brand entity that somewhere you refer to yourself as, Bob's Plumbing, Brisbane Plumber, leaky toilets, blah, blah, blah. But then on your social profiles, you're just Bob's Plumbing as well. It's always good to just, for that perspective as well, also make sure that it is really consistent.
Yeah.
I think that's really thorough, Laura. Is there anything else that you want to add on brand at all at this stage?
No. Do I need to reiterate that brand does matter?
I think you've done a wonderful job of that. I think that's important. Obviously, always seen as two separate entities. Brand and SEO is now intrinsically linked. So make sure that you've got that consistent brand, and it's a brand that you love and support, and it's clear and identifiable as well. Awesome. If you need help with your brand and reinvigorating it or making sure it's consistent, you can go to www.excitemedia.com.au. We would absolutely love to help you out. Also, if you have questions, feel free to pop it in the comments and we will do our best to get back to you. Otherwise, we will see you next week in our final video covering our WTF is SEO series. And we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks so much.
Thank you.